All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. It's been a while. Time has flown by. What's it called? Facebook popped up the other day that it's been 2 years since we did um, this whole series to begin with. So, if you're new to this, welcome. This is emotional intelligence and quantum physics, as we coin it. And really, it's a wide ranging series that we cover on all sorts of topics. And look, the way this all came about is my very esteemed co-host, very knowledgeable Nini, um, has such a great perspective on various topics, but as well as her deep knowledge and insight, she's got this really relatable way of communicating it to us through simple analogies, simple stories. And me, on the other hand, trying to put that in the mold of emotional intelligence. So that's where the two worlds combine, if you will. And we thought, we were catching up the other day and thought, do you know what? We've not done one of these for ages. So, we thought, right, let's get back recording and get another episode going. So, Nini, welcome back. How are things? And yeah, why don't we just queue up and get talking?
Yeah, no, thanks. Things are, they're going well. It's always interesting. And I think it's really important, the idea of, emotional intelligence with whether you want to say quantum physics or any type of the sciences, because, I think a lot of people are very, very knowledgeable when it comes to the IQ, the intellect. And one of the things that people seem to love to hate is the emotional work. It's like, oh, who has time for that stuff? But
Mm,
one of the things that we were discussing is, the idea of healing. And when I
yeah.
speak to people, most people think, and myself, I had this error also, healing means that you're perfect, that you're cured, that you're no longer experiencing ailments or disease that's gone forever. And I'm not saying that's not part of it, but really the word healing means to come into wholeness. And coming into wholeness encompasses integrating the things that are tough and the things that are good. And in order to do that, that means facing our emotions, according to Jungian psychology, our shadows, our dark parts, facing our dark night of the soul, and being courageous enough to really confront it and say, yeah, the things that I don't recognize as myself, I need to start reintegrating back into who I am so I can be a whole person. And yeah, it's messy. Healing healing is messy, but it's very, very important.
Absolutely. And when we were sort of catching up, talking about like what to talk about on the show, um, we thought that healing is a very pertinent topic right now because um, the world. I mentioned, it's been about 2 years since we first started the series, but in that 2 years, it feels like the uncertainty that was around at the time of the world just seems to have amplified. Whether it's the geopolitical situation or wide ranging topics that impact everybody, like climate change or like human identity, or even identifying who you are as a human being and where you fit. All these topics seem to be still talked about more, but coming from a real space of like, well, how do we progress? How do we move forward? There's so many polarities that are being presented to us, where everything still feels like a black or white choice. We're very much in the space of grayscale thinking, that you develop your own perspective and your own ideas. But we're talking about how healing is, as Nini mentioned, sometimes messy but necessary. And Nini had a great analogy about digestion as exemplifying that.
Yeah, it's one of the things I like to joke about is we all love, most people, I shouldn't say we all, I shouldn't assume, there are a lot of people maybe that struggle, but for the most part, people like food, people like setup, it's pretty. Maybe not everyone enjoys cooking, but the idea of making something, making a meal is festive and all of that, and eating is nice. And again, putting aside people who struggle with emotional eating, I'm just talking in general, putting that aside, coming together, let's say with a family or a ritual or whatever it is, celebrating over food and drink and all kinds of
Yeah.
stuff. People look forward to that, but then there's the cleanup. So part of the cleanup is the stack of dirty dishes. I mean, that's also one part, but then the other part is when you're eating, it goes through digestion. There's the unpleasant, aspect of people go to the bathroom and it's like everybody eats and everybody poops. You can't sit there and eat and not poop. That's not humanly what part of the process. You can't have one without the other. So that's the analogy I had given that, in life, we can't think that we're going to live our lives being super, super good and super pious and super amazing without some understanding that there's an opposite extreme, that we should not be worshiping either extreme, but we use both extremes to let us know if I go too far over to this side, I'm going to be in the positive toxicity zone. and I'll be spiritually bypassing. And if I go all the way to the other side, I'm going to be very, very malevolent. I can be harmful to people and myself. I'm going to be evil, and neither extreme is good. It's using, well, these are the extremes. Now, where is my focal point? And what is my focal point and my center point will be different than somebody else. Just again, going back to the food analogy, someone with, depending on their blood type or their gender or their, their amount of activity they do, they're going to need different foods than someone different. So everyone's balance point is going to be unique, and it's, it behooves us not to be judgmental, because that's, again, we sit there, we think I know better than you, I can tell you how to live your life, and that's not really fair, because in a perspective, we're all the privileged observers to our own subjective experience. So for me to sit there and say, without experiencing your qualia, oh, well, you must see things this way because that's how I see them, that's solipsistic. And it's kind of not nice to say it regularly.
It's a really good point there, because adding to all this uncertainty, we see a lot of forthright people that proclaim this is the only answer. Whatever the question or challenge or topic might be, a lot of the time we're being portrayed from certain avenues that this is the popularist thought, this is how it should be thought about. If you've got any difference of opinion, perspective, then it's shouted down. And that brings about, I think, even more questioning of like, well, if I naturally feel this, then is that the wrong thing to accept, and do I need to change? All these kind of things. So you lose that authenticity. I think you lose that sense of finding your own path, your individual perspective and path, etc. And we've heard probably different versions of the phrase of like, if you want the good, you got to put it with the bad. If you want the rainbow, you got to put it with the rain. If you want the good, you got to put up with the shit. Literally, maybe in the digestive case. But that speaks of, I guess, the whole people do confuse that healing work, as you said, of like this permanent state that you go into where everything is fixed forever. It's like you're kind of missing the point a little bit there. It's great to feel the effects of the healing and working on yourself that you do, but really, if you approach that more with the idea of, okay, now when things crop up like this in future, which they're gonna do, in all likelihood, what you've given yourself now is the means of showing yourself what you can respond with instead of the automatic behaviors that you previously be going through. That's what a healing process could show you, that this is the way to address it, understand more about it, so that when it comes up again, you're better equipped to deal with it. But as you said, that is it confused at the moment with a one-time instant overnight fix?
Yeah, and the dangerous thing, with the overnight fixes, and this is how I know, when I see, let's say, a product or a service or whatever, even if it's something very spiritual, yeah, do my course and you'll see amazing manifestations. I look at that, and just being a psychic, I'll hear this like psychic static. I'll hear it like clairaudiently, and the moment I hear that static, and I have this like flip feeling in my stomach, I'm like, okay, you're talking about spirituality, but really deep down that's consumerism, because you're assuming that someone has the problem that you're saying, or you're kind of tapping into a shared vulnerability, let's say like, self-esteem. And you're saying, oh, have a low sense of self, just do my 10 steps and you'll be healed and cured and blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you can't say that, because I'll speak from my own experiences of being a healer. I cannot ever promise that a client is going to get a certain result, because that's really up to them. I can say, I'll take you as far as you're willing to go, and I'm
Yes.
happy to teach you the skills. But it's like you said, we have to take the bad with the good. And, roses have thorns. And if you think you're going to you're going to obliterate the thorns, the rose will die. And that's the thing. A lot of people in spirituality say, we're going to obliterate the ego. I have absolved my ego and I no longer struggle. Well, you know what? Guess what? People who have absolved their ego are dead. And, death and dying, it's a whole other topic. It's not as dead as we think it is. It's actually very much alive. It's just an altered state of consciousness. But that's a whole other discussion. But it's, while we're here in this life, it's, we see it everywhere. We see it in math. You look at the unit circle and you break that down. You see the oscillating, the sine wave, the trigonometric ratios, that up and down. You see that in the seasons, when winter is in preponderance. In the winter solstice, summer is silent. but it doesn't mean that it's not summer someplace else, you know. And then you have the poles will reverse when you hit the solstice, because everything stops. Like, you know, the days hit a peak, whether it's long or short, and then the poles reverse, and then you start to flip to the other side, and then, you know, you have the equinox, where now the days and the nights are at equal amounts, and then it starts to carry on towards the opposite solstice, and these it keeps turning. So the idea of a binary system, what you were describing before, you know, the all or nothing thinking, it's either yes or it's no, that's also kind of illusory, because yes, while it's winter, it cannot be summer in this location at the same time, because we don't live in the quantum superposition. I mean, we do, but again, we don't perceive it that way because we're physical and classical beings. So we perceive, you know, right now for us, it's heading towards the summer. So we're heading right for the summer solstice, the best time of year, in my opinion. And for me, yeah, the days are long. You know, at 4:30, it's light, and I love that because I'm up early. I'm up at 3, so I love that. It's great. But for someone else on the other hemisphere, to them, it's the wintertime and it's cold. So it just shows that everything is moving, and that a binary fixed thought system is false. We tell ourselves it's just because it's winter today, it's going to be winter till the end of time, but that's not true. It will pass. We can try and resist it. We can try and hold it back, but try as you might, the universe is always one step ahead. So it's gonna move whether you like it or not, basically.
It's a very good mini lesson that you mentioned there, of the idiom of "this too shall pass," which I think often gets brushed away as like a very loose thing. If, like, you know, we're just saying it to make ourselves feel better. No, there may be some truth in that, because when things are tough in our own space that we consider, we're like, okay, it takes, first of all, we want to feel the emotion behind it. We want to process for what is going on, and then we come to a space where, like, well, yeah, much as it might go against what we're feeling right now, where things do feel infinite, like, you know, this will never change and I'm always that. So we use, I think, a lot of universal quantifiers come up in that instance, like always, everything, everyone, never, you know, speaks to the whole all or nothing perspective, very binary. We're at either one end or the other, and well, particularly at one end, and we're just going to stay at that end. But when, you know, we do consider, you know, I read a great post today about somebody talking about the aspect of time. Time is something we're not in control of, but, you know, it seems to play such a huge role in our lives that we fixate on a time period that's not happened yet, i.e. the future. We have a lot of attachment to the past, which we can't get back, and the only time we can impact is right now. But in saying so, we when we bring that time factor in, we realize the change element to it, of yes, it might be, things might be rubbish right now, but they can easily change, because, okay, you know, even if we stayed still, various environments and factors and things around us will change. It's up to us to be receptive of what's going on, and therefore we instigate our own change in that regard. So when we say this too shall pass, people may go, right, if I just sort of ignore what I'm feeling or suppress it, then that's what it means. But the fallacy there could be, well, you're just moving that processing stuff, you know, you're kicking the can down the line, so to speak, because you're not given that space to go, well, I'll experience it in whatever that looks like to me, again, the individual thing. And, you know, time doesn't stay static in that regard. Time keeps moving. And, you know, people do talk about, you know, time as a healer and this kind of thing, which again sounds a bit philosophical, but actually I was recapping something today in something I'm writing about the concept of urge surfing. So just as a slight tangent here, this is the concept that, say you're reading a book, for example, and for whatever reason you're struggling to make headway into it. You might not be enjoying the content, or it's not making sense to you. And at the same time, your mind or subconscious is trying to give you other options to do. Oh, let's watch some TV instead, or watch some Netflix, or go on your phone, or whatever it might be. But what this piece was talking about was that it's struggling to stay focused on the book because it's kind of bored of it, and bored in the sense of, like, the subconscious always wants something new, always wants something different to get it, absorb, because the dopamine hit from the original as in opening the new book, new page, has worn off. So in experiencing something new, it builds its own resistance to it. So it's not so much that you're struggling with focusing on the book or whatever it is at hand. It's the fact that you've got the urge to do something else. But what this piece is talking about is if you can ride that urge by going, okay, I can observe the urge, I can acknowledge it, your subconscious will actually get bored of looking for something new and return back to the book. So again, in that space, time has passed. So your subconscious has gone, okay, I'm bored of that option now. I'll go back to this one. But it's fascinating how we, just small phrases like that, like this too shall pass, etc., feels very tough in the moment to do. But when we practice it, we open more possibilities.
What you were describing over there, about when you described the book, and then you're kind of monkey minding. I want to watch TV. I want to go outside. I want to put on Netflix or whatever it is. I don't have Netflix, so I can't say I'm well versed in that. But and then, like you said, whether it's a comfort zone or you kind of just sometimes you have a hard time adjusting. It's like, when you get into a very cold pool, like for me, I hate the cold. So it's like, it's always forever when the water is too cold. I'm like, I'm like standing there forever trying to adjust. But then once you adjust, you realize, okay, it's not so bad. So the book might be posing that kind of a challenge. But what you described there is you come into something called presence. You sit there and, it's because we try to sometimes ignore the monkey mind and say, okay, monkey mind, just shut up. But it's like, no, you can't do that, because now what you're doing is suppressing and then eventually repressing your own thoughts and feelings. Say, yeah, I observe, I'm monkey minding. I really don't want to do this. Maybe there's a reason. Let me ask. And you kind of get a little bit curious. You inquire, I wonder why I don't want to get into this new book right now. And sometimes it's just as simple as you're feeling a little apprehensive. There's a little bit of trepidation, and there's nothing really wrong. It's just you have to give yourself the permission to struggle. The permission. There's a saying, you have to be brave enough to let yourself suck at something at least once. So give yourself the permission that it's hard for you to adjust and become present to it. And I found that when you become present, you give yourself that grace, then you're able to say, okay. And then if you truly don't enjoy the book, like I've had books where, let's say, the author is very self-righteous and it's just preaching, I just say, you know what, I can't continue. Even though the content is interesting, I cannot stand this person's attitude. So I'm going to just close the book and walk away. And sometimes it's just, I had to get comfortable with it because it was something new. And when you become present, then, you, like you said, you're not dwelling in the past, something that, quote unquote, you can't directly change. I can't say you can't change it, but it's another topic. And then in the future, which, quote unquote, hasn't happened yet, you're right here. You're becoming present to the moment, and you're saying, okay, I can choose how I let the moment be for myself and how I choose to respond to it, as opposed to feeling like a victim of, chronological or chronos time.
Absolutely. And these concepts, people listening may go, okay, they might be a little bit out of my experience and not heard this before, but if you give yourself the time to practice it, then all we're talking about here is that staying in the present moment, which is going to look different for each individual. So when we do experience these things for the first time, it's going to feel alien. And that's when I think you'll feel the pull of our existing behaviors and patterns that we've been used to for so long. But in this space of we're trying to introduce new patterns, as you said, speak to your monkey mind, have the dialogue with it to go, okay, what might be behind this reaction or behavior, rather than just acquiesce to it. But when we fold this back into the whole thing, we're talking about healing. That's, so we just talked about, reading a book and having the alternatives. So when people, I think, are presented with the idea of healing, people might quickly think of the physical body. Oh, I've got something, something wrong with my leg or whatever it might be. Let me go and heal that. So it's not to say you'll never get another leg injury again or whatever it might be. But it's like right now, next time it crops up, this is what it might be. So you're giving yourself the ideas, the clues there. But when we talk about healing from that kind of working on yourself perspective, maybe your self-worth or shadow work or whatever it might be, people might be a bit reticent of that because of, well, A, where do I start? And B, is this actually going to work for me? There is that little bit of cynicism that might come with that healing space. But I've always said that you're only going to want to do it when you're curious enough. And again, that looks different for everybody. When you've got the want to go there, we've all got the answers in ourselves already, I'd say. So rather than looking for it out there, which is what we're stuck with at the moment, which viewpoint should I take? What's going to be acceptable? What's my individual healing thing looking like? Well, if we start with the very notion that you have your answers already, it's just they may be, trapped somewhere at the moment. And that's essentially the work that you go through to go find them. Then we open ourselves to the idea of healing in that regard. And as you said, healing is not a one-off, instant, permanent fix that we tap into, but it's more like, okay, I can, by accessing the healing, I can access more integration, more acceptance, more acknowledgement, so that the results of healing come as a natural byproduct.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel like we were having a discussion about addiction, a couple of friends, and I was saying, one of the important things that should be understood is that relapse is part of the healing process, and that, it's crucial that, as for people who are doing the practitioners have to have the emotional intelligence to give space for people to have a relapse. And at the same time, the science needs to be up to date, understanding how the neurochemicals and the neurotransmitters work. Like dopamine is very easy to get addicted with because it's a instant gratification, fast acting neurotransmitter, whereas serotonin, which is also associated with pleasure, happens slowly over time. So it's like the difference between going to a fast food restaurant where you get your food really quick versus going to a fancier restaurant where you have to wait. It's much easier to get addicted to the quick stuff because it's quick and it's easy. And I was having this discussion and someone else just came in unsolicited into the conversation and basically said, I hate when people say that relapse is part of the process. It isn't. That just means you don't know what you're doing. And I was quite taken aback. I was like, oh my God, I wasn't going to fight with this person because when they don't know their science, I don't even waste my time because it's going to be an argument not about empirical data or, supported subjective experience. It's going to be well, my butt is bigger than yours, and I'm bigger and you're smaller, and I can push you over. It's going to be this emotional, argumentative binary. I can push you around because I've got a bigger mouth game. The emotional coercion. So I wasn't going to play it, but the response I was thinking of, wow, if you're struggling with an addiction, I hope you don't put the pressure on your healer or your sponsor that they have to get you out of it, and that if you make a mistake, it is their fault for not doing their job. Because if that's what you're doing, you're never going to heal. Like that's the example of someone who may find a cure if they do enough quick fixes. They may get rid of the problem, but in this situation, the problem, or I should say more accurately, the symptom is just a symptom. It's just the check engine light. The underlying thing is that this person expects to do it on the first try, one right way, and has a tremendous amount of expectations from the externals to do the work for them. This is someone who will probably, unless they get their head in another direction, they probably will not heal, despite if they have a cure, because they may not have an addiction anymore, but they're going to walk around angry all the time. And I could tell just by that response. I'm like, ugh, like, dude, I can send a prayer for you, but like, get the freak out of my space. Like, I didn't ask your unsolicited opinion, so please don't give it. It's disrespectful for all those who really want to heal.
Well, it's a very good point that you make there of we're not in a space where, as you said, we're telling each other we try not to tell each other what to do. And as you rightly pointed out at the beginning, there's a lot of people that go, if you follow these steps, this will work for you. It's like, no, you at some point you'll have to take your own responsibility for it. And that's the point. It's your own. So you guide your own results in that regard. So when we look to practice that, it does go against the grain of, well, someone else has got the answers. Someone else can give me the answers so I can shortcut the work. And if I get like a short-term result, then that means I've clocked it. I've done it. Well, that's the point. It's a short-term result. So going back to your fast food versus restaurant food analogy, yes, you can get full and satisfied from the junk straight away, the fast food, but invariably you'll be hungry shortly after. So you got the short-term hit of the quick and easy fast food, but the symptom then returns. It's the same here. When we think we've clocked it and someone's given us an answer that's led to a result, we'll go, yeah, Now, we're not going to say that that experience of the result is wrong. That's fine. But then that's the point, to maintain it, to make it a lasting pattern or behavior. That's where the work comes into it. So yeah, you know, people talk about things like beginner's luck, or as you said, a right combination of factors, and you know, leads to a result. But the prolonged practice, the consistency, which will invariably bring about mistakes and relapses and going back into old existing patterns and behaviors, is part of the process. But if it was that easy, then this would be much more straightforward for everybody concerned. Everybody would have the quick way to do it, to fix it straight away, and we wouldn't have issues, problems that we're seeing, and challenges that we're seeing nowadays. That's the point. This is a prolonged journey with its ups and downs, like with anything that we learn from scratch and new, whether it's an instrument or learning to drive a car or new language, new recipe. Yeah, the right combination of factors might give you a result straight away, but now is the practice. But people forget the practice, and when that's, I guess, called out publicly like that, of like, you know, relapses are part of it, then the ego takes a bit of a hit, because on one part, you're the person is trying hard to suppress the idea of like, no, I clocked it the first time, so I don't need any more work. That's a bit of an ego boost. But back in the background, it's like, yeah, but if you want to get this going, you got to keep going and practicing. Like, no, I'm good. I'm good. So when somebody says in so much words of like, no, you will continue to make mistakes, you're like, no, I'm not, because a part of the person might actually be jealous of somebody admitting that when they're trying hard to suppress it. Which I know the thought in itself might sound a bit counterintuitive, but when we're actually honest with ourselves, we're like, actually, do you know what? It may be the case. That's why we're getting that kind of vociferous reaction, and that,
Yeah,
you know, people try to engage in an ego battle where they're trying to get their point forcibly across. You know, that like, this is the only way to do it. But yeah,
and that would be an example of the shadows playing out, because that which I don't recognize in myself, I project onto you. So
yeah,
yeah, if that person is struggling with some sort of an addiction, and I'm calling this forward, and they're like, well, excuse me, it's they don't recognize the jealousy or the anger in themselves. So I become the bad guy, and I'm sure we've all been the scapegoat of that, and it doesn't feel very good. And it's one of those, when you come to seeing people's homeless, we all do it. We all make that mistake. And when I catch myself doing that to someone, I'll take a step back and say, if I don't catch it, I do appreciate when people call me out on it, obviously respectfully, but when I do catch it, I'm like, wait, whoa, 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 okay, if I'm having this response, what's going on? And it's usually some sort of, where I'm afraid to do the work. So then I have to look at myself and say, okay, I better start walking my talk, because I also find that the more that people walk their talk and really demonstrate what it is they're talking about, the level of integrity speaks for itself, because anyone can get up there and preach about something, but when nobody's looking, or when they think nobody's looking, how are they really acting? And that's the question. And if they're saying one thing and doing another, even though nobody might see it, it can be felt as a vibrational frequency, because the energy behind our actions emanates into the field. It can be felt as morphic resonance. It can be felt, and you want to say the cosmic field, the quantum field, call it what you want. It can be felt. You ever walk in a room and you can just tell that person's a fake? You don't even have to know their past. You just look and you're like, I'm getting a bad feeling here. That can be felt. So always honor your own intuition, and yeah, come to your space of wholeness, because it's sacred. And you had mentioned also, and never ever trade in your authenticity to try to survive, because if someone is making you feel that you need to buy love, or that you need to buy survival, that person is not your friend. I don't care if it's a parent or a spouse or a child or a relative or quote unquote a best friend. If that person is making you feel like you need to earn love, to buy love, to be worthy, get the freak away. It's in the nicest possible way. Don't be a jerk about it, but just, that is not genuine.
yeah, great point there. And again, people might have heard that, and it might have invoked a reaction, which is absolutely fine, because even just upon hearing it, it might feel like, oh crap, I hadn't thought of it like that, or that's what might be going on in my space. And it's okay to acknowledge that if that does come up, because going back to what we were saying before about the world still being very uncertain about where we are and identity and all this kind of thing, I think one of those things that is still out there is as you said, like if you want that acceptance, that validation, that love, etc., it feels a bit of a transaction basis. If I do this, then I will get this. So we're still in that kind of bartering world where we put our self-worth up for ransom based on that human need of connection, of significance, of love. But it's a really good point to say that if people perpetuate that image to you, then this is where you can practice setting, communicating, and defending your own boundaries, which again, they're up to you. That's the one thing one of the things that you can be irresponsible for, have total responsibility for, is to set, communicate so that people are aware of it, and defend your boundaries in that regard. And look, it's not to say it's an easy thing, you say it and off you go, because that's the point. The active defense of it is going to be difficult. There are people, because even that notion of communicating your boundaries will freak some other people out, because the way you've been operating via your patterns and behaviors for so long has met some needs for them. They get certainty from you, they get control from you, in the sense of like, if you're seen as like dependable, or this is what you'll do, then that meets needs for them because you're doing things for them subliminally. But when you start to change that, you impact their world, and they freak out by it, going, whoa, you didn't used to be like this, or what's going on here, what changed? Because they're like, fuck, my certainty's being compromised here. So as well as you practicing it, it's going to freak people out, and they in turn might display that hostility towards you. It's like, you didn't used to be like this, and what's going on, and this kind of thing. But as you're practicing and trying to find your way, again, their reactions is not your own responsibility. And that does not mean you go to the other end of the scale and be completely obnoxious and a bit of a knobhead to everybody. But it's just finding your own space, your own boundary, which lets you then forge your own identity way forward, and therefore increase your self-worth as a natural byproduct.
Yeah, and to add to that also is that people who really do love you, they may display that hostility at first, but and I've had this experience, but when they're really, really curious, they'll say, no, really, what's changed? And they'll be curious. And then when you establish your boundaries, they'll say, something, you're right. I mean, they might not say the words you're right, but they'll see that you have shifted, and they will rise in tow with you. I've seen that too, where people who really, really care will rise with you, and they'll say, something, I'm inspired. I had that conversation with someone who does not see eye to eye with me. And, we were just having like a regular conversation, and I was explaining how I changed something. And remember, she said, this is really inspiring. She goes, your inspiration is making me want to shift as well. And, rather than it being a power struggle, which it could have been in the past, she just said, can you help me? And I said, it would be my honor. I would love to help you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And, you might find that those that, that you think are hostile at first, when you give them space for them to be curious and to explore who they are, they may rise up. And I've seen that. And, conversely, you'll have some that'll just, because they'll be mad because now they can't coerce you anymore. You're not going to be their little guinea pig. You're not going to be their scapegoats. They have nowhere to dump their BS. So they're stuck facing it, with themselves, which they don't want to do. So those are the people who, are not your friends. And those are the people you lovingly walk away from to say, I wish you the best, but I have to go. I'm not sticking around. So
yeah. And that very notion might again spark some in us, because this could be, when we're referring to these kind of people, this could be people like our parents, our siblings, our closest friends, the people closest around us. And here's the thing, invariably with this kind of work, it's very much your own. So the practice here is that we cannot expect others to change as we're trying to change, because that is up to them. So no matter now how much we want them to change, or if we want them, we can't influence that. And again, that in itself might be counterintuitive again, of like, because we've been used to the mold of, if I do this, then they'll do this. It's very much like, whatever input I put in, this is the output I should get from our experiences, observations, past instances, all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, a person, you're only responsible for what you say, do, think, and behave, as the other person is responsible for what they say, do, think, and behave.
Yes,
Again, this does not
absolutely.
mean you go back to the other extreme of like, right, I don't impact anybody. I could just do what I want, say what I want. No, not that. It's the balance, but it's also the idea that where our relapse might come from or a mistake is to go, I'm doing everything I can to change and they're not changing. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's completely a valid observation. That's not to say that's wrong. But here's the thing, if we change that narrative around, so again, not to deny what's going on, the observation's valid, but to go, okay, what can I change in this instance? It is things like being less in their life, however that looks like to you. People might want to move out or quit their job if it's a boss, or in their relationship if it's a difficult partner. And again, I'm not saying to everybody, right, go quit your job and leave home and leave your partner. No, no, no. But what responsibility can you take in the situation rather than engaging in an ego battle saying, well, I'm changing and you never do this and you, not up to you. What can you do and say? If you bring it back to yourself, that's where you orientate and heal even further.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's the message I say also. What can, the question I ask myself is what's the next baby step forward that I can
Yeah,
take to make a difference? I'm not going to change somebody else, and that's not my business, but what is the next step that I can take? And yeah, that's the work. So yeah, it's really been great to do this show with you today. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our next one, but there's so much to discuss here. It's just it's amazing.
as always, absolutely. And guys, look, if you've watched this and thought, look, I want more discussion on this or want to approach another topic, feel free to drop it in the comments and stuff. We're always happy to create the discussions and conversations about what you guys would like to hear. We'll drop links in the posts and comments wherever you're seeing this to find out more about us too, and communicating and chatting with us further and finding out about what we do. But look, nice one for tuning in. I know it's been a while, but nice to be back, and I hope to do these more regularly. But until the next one, we'll see you then.
Thanks. Thank you.